Hi, Psych students. This is probably one of my favorite lectures of the year, so I apologize that I have to do it from home. But I'm going to try to go through some of the information just so that you can take notes, hopefully understand it. Monday, I plan on doing an entire unit review in little practice test, and then Tuesday will be your test. So today is all about drugs, and it's one of the greatest lectures of the year. So if you have any questions, make sure you jot them down. We can talk about them on Monday and ask me stories or whatever. I'll try not to talk too long. I'm home with Eddie is sick, and then I have, this is Mac. He's extremely needy. So I'm going to try to condense this down into 20 minutes and not ramble on. So let me just put on my glasses, and we will start the lecture. Oh, Google is so fun. So I always think it's interesting that we cover drugs when we talk about consciousness, because you're like, we're talking about sleep, we're talking about dreams. Where does heroin come into that? But the reason that we talk about drugs in this unit is because psychoactive drugs are any type of chemical introduced to your body which can alter your perceptions, your moods, and generally your conscious experience. So drugs alter your awareness. Remember, the entire chapter is about your consciousness, which refers to what you are aware of. And drugs definitely physiologically induce other states of consciousness. Despite just actually inducing a different level of consciousness, drugs can also present other psychological problems when you start talking about dependence and addiction. And we will talk about dependence and addiction in a later chapter when we talk about disorders. But it's important to go over some of these hallmarks right now of what it means to actually be dependent on a substance or addicted to a substance. The first thing having to do with addiction to something refers to tolerance. Tolerance is referring to how much of a drug, or the fact that you need more of a drug to get desired effects over a longer period of time. So your first exposure to alcohol might have you feeling a certain way, but over time you require larger quantities of alcohol to feel that same way you did the very first time. So tolerance, and this is your body basically getting used to the substance and rewiring itself to operate with that substance in its system. So if you normally have caffeine, your body just gets accustomed to it, builds a tolerance to that caffeine, learns how to operate properly with that caffeine in its system, and eventually you will need just more and more of it to get that kind of sustained effect of caffeine that you would have the very first time that you sipped Mountain Dew. So the chart here explains tolerance and how you need more and more of something over time. Once your body has kind of rewired itself to get used to a substance, and then that substance is taken away or removed, or you are without that substance, the body can go through withdrawal. Withdrawal is your body basically being unable to properly function without the substance in your system. It's actually a physical, painful thing because your body, you have wired your body a certain way, and now you took that component away. You've taken the heroin out of your system, and the body cannot function properly without it. I shouldn't say function properly, but it causes a lot of pain because your body got used to it in the first place. With addiction, this becomes a circle effect because a person will try to kick something or be like, you know what, I probably shouldn't be using heroin. But then the withdrawal symptoms are so strong, severe, and painful that using heroin again makes that feeling go away. So it just kind of keeps spiraling back in a circle. So then all of a sudden you're using again. All of a sudden you're drinking again. All of a sudden you're smoking again. and it just worsens and worsens the addiction. Every time you slip back into using that substance, you are rewiring your body again stronger, so that the next time you try to kick that substance, it's going to be even harder. So that's why it's always, with any type of psychoactive drug, whether we're talking alcohol or something more severe, you don't want to go down a path where you start using large quantities or become addicted, because once you are, you start to get into this pattern of it just making it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse for your body. So don't do drugs. Dependence, there's two different types of dependence. The first one is what I kind of just referred to on the other two slides, the physical dependence, how your body has been altered to deal with that substance in your system. If you know anybody, for example, that's been on ADHD medication from when they were like in elementary school, and then they use it all the way through middle school and high school, the body just eventually becomes physically dependent on that substance, or basically the body just sort of gets used to it. You build up a tolerance to it. That's a physical dependence. The body is used to that substance. Psychologically, a person can develop basically like a psychological crutch, a psychological need to have that substance for the purpose of relaxing, socializing, or whatever it might be. So maybe the body hasn't built, or maybe the body has a physical dependence to alcohol, but it might also just be a psychological dependence. It's Saturday night, I'm with my friends, I have to drink. That would be a psychological dependence. You just think you need it. And we see both of these things, physical and psychological dependence with addiction. These are the hallmarks of being dependent on something. I guess you could classify it as addiction. Keep in mind that you are just psychology students. You are not qualified to diagnose anybody with any kind of an addiction of any sort. These are just hallmarks of dependency. And I always liken this to substance dependencies, but you could also stretch this into activity dependency. So people that are they addicted to running or lifting weights, self-pleasuring themselves, drinking coffee, using alcohol. You can go back to the substances with that too. But any type of activity, cell phone use, that's what I was trying to think of. In social media, like tweets and snaps, are there people that are actually addicted to those activities? They have a dependence on those activities. So as you go through each point here, think to yourself, does a person or can somebody be so addicted to Snapchat that they start reducing other activities because they would rather be snapping, or they spend so much time with that. The last one is interesting with continued use despite aversive consequences. So has that person gotten in trouble before or had some sort of aversive consequences, but yet still continues to use? So, they had a DUI for drinking, but then they continued to do that behavior. Perhaps they had some sort of a overdose situation, but they still continue to use. That would be a sign of dependence or addiction. So there are 4 major classifications of drugs. I do need you to know all 4 of the little categories. Depressants is one of the larger ones that we'll talk about. That's the first one we're going to talk about. If you write anything down, just write down. Depressants are like the brakes in a car. The job of a depressant is to slow down and dampen your neural activity and basically your entire body functions. So its job is to make you be slow, like Flash in Zootopia. It's supposed to just slow everything down. The largest example of a depressant that most people are familiar with is alcohol. Alcohol is a very accessible, when you're 21, depressant, very publicly accepted in a lot of arenas. We're coming up on Super Bowl Sunday, and so there will be people consuming some alcohol on Sunday, I assume. And it's interesting in the sense that when you actually look at what alcohol can do to your neural processing and what it does to you when you are under the influence of alcohol, it's not almost, it is more harmful, and it alters your psychology more than some of the other drugs we will talk about later. So it's kind of interesting that alcohol is one of the more socially acceptable drugs that we'll talk about within this presentation, yet a lot of the psychological and biological information, scientific information we have on alcohol, actually, like, it does pretty bad things to you. So alcohol's job is to slow down your neural processing. It reduces the way messages are transmitted through your body. It totally will disrupt your memory. We'll talk about memory later in the memory chapter, but a student asked me once about blacking out and how come you don't remember anything if you're under the use of alcohol. And it all has to do with the fact that those messages don't get sent to your memory. Things that happen under the influence of alcohol sometimes don't get formulated, because when you're under the influence of alcohol, you don't go into REM sleep. So that's another thing. People that are constantly going to sleep or passing out, they're not actually getting REM sleep, which means they're not getting restorative sleep, which means their brains are not recharging, which means their neural pathways are dying. So somebody that is routinely not getting REM sleep because of the effects of alcohol is doing a lot of damage to their body that way. You have the scans here of the two different brains. You can see what brain damage does here with alcoholism. This is repeated use of alcohol. This isn't, I had a beer on Super Bowl Sunday. This is repeated exposures to alcohol consistently over time. And you can basically just see, because alcohol slows down those neural pathways, eventually those roads decay and die. And so eventually what happens is you lose brain matter. You're killing, your neural pathways die. Because alcohol slows the growth process of those neural pathways, and if they're not growing, then they die. So that's what happens. Alcohol likes to sit in the frontal lobe a lot of times too, which has to do with judgment and reason, which is why alcohol can be so concerning with driving and decision-making, sexual situations and things like that. People making poor decisions under the influence of alcohol, because alcohol slows your neural processes down, especially in your frontal lobe. So whereas you would normally be able to make an excellent judgment call on something, under the use of alcohol, you're not, because those pathways, those avenues that you normally use to make decisions are blocked. There's barricades up and those messages aren't getting through, which is why we see increased accidents and aggression and, like I said before, poor decision-making in general under the use of alcohol, which can be fatal and serious. So some of the effects of alcohol can be quite severe. I should say that. A barbiturate is also a depressant. A barbiturate is, they're called like tranquilizers, but they're drugs. So a lot of times these are going to be prescription medications. And their job is to suppress central nervous system activity. Alcohol does that in a sense also, but alcohol is more kind of geared straight up at the brain, stops your neural pathways into the thinking process. Barbiturates focus really on your whole central nervous system, so it slows the messages down to, like, your arms, your legs, your back. So it's why it's a lot of painkillers or anti-anxiety medications, because what they're trying to do is slow those messages down. So if you're feeling really anxious about something, or you're feeling really stressed about something, a barbiturate is going to help you calm down, because then you don't have to think about those feelings, and I'm not getting those messages that I'm anxious and things like that. Under the influence of barbiturates, a lot of the same things as alcohol with the depressant, things that you're doing, you're disrupting your memory and your judgment and concentration. Big thing to be concerned about with barbiturates and alcohol is mixing them, and this has to go for any of the drugs. If you're under the influence of a depressant and then you add more depressants on top of that, so if you mix barbiturates and alcohol, two depressants together, what you are potentially doing to your body is slowing it all the way down to a dangerous level. And in some cases, you can slow your body all the way down to 0 miles per hour, and then you die. And there can be, accidental overdose. So if you think of celebrities, Heath Ledger, things like that, where you died because of an accidental overdose, what's usually happening in those situations is a person has mixed too many different depressants together, and they basically slammed the brakes on their body all the way down to 0 miles per hour, and then they died. Thanks. Opiates. Opiates are actually the painkillers. I kind of spoke out of turn there. Barbiturates kind of focus on anxiety. Opiates are more designed for pain, but it's the same sort of idea. They suppress nervous system activity. Opiates are different from barbiturates in the fact that opiates are chemicals that can come from the opium poppy. For example, heroin, morphine. Opiates also are extremely highly addictive. They have substance qualities in them that, the body instantly grabs onto and rewires itself. Whereas, you take alcohol, or you do alcohol. You drink alcohol once, your body's not going to rewire itself to get used to alcohol right away. Same thing with a barbiturate. You could, if you've ever had surgery or something like that, or you take a drug, you're not going to get instantly addicted. Your body's not going to rewire itself instantly because of a short-term exposure to a psychoactive drug. With an opiate, however, it could be a very quick rewiring, which is why morphine and some of these painkillers, the doctors really do watch when they put patients on these to make sure they're not taking them for long periods of time, because you take heroin once or twice or 3 times, your body instantly rewires itself to get used to that substance, and all of a sudden you've started this sort of dependence and tolerance withdrawal, the cycle of dependence. The opiates are slowing things down, and that ends up kind of, the one thing that operates under the influence of opiates is your endorphins, so the body's natural pain receptors, which actually make you feel good. So that's why, that's the plus of heroin. Why do people even use it? Besides the fact that it's suppressing their central nervous system, it does give you a high. And what that high is actually your natural endorphins coming through, and everything else is slowed down. All right, see if I can pop back here. Hi. Oh, I still got my glasses on. Coffee. It's amazing. It's lovely. It's a drug. The next category of drugs is stimulants. Whereas depressants were the brake pedal, stimulants are the gas pedal. The job of a stimulant is to intensify neural activity in your bodily functions. It's to make you go, 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 go. It is to pump different things through your body and get you moving. So caffeine is the most readily accessible, and it's completely legal. The job of caffeine is to add energy to your system. It is a psychoactive drug, though, because it is altering your conscious awareness, and it is altering your perceptions and your moods and things like that. So it is a drug. There are not as many adversive reactions with caffeine as there are like heroin, which is why it's legal. But anyway, I know some of you out there, at least one of you, is a caffeine fan, so coffee fan. So here's your info on caffeine. It can disrupt your sleep for up to 3 to 4 hours. So consuming caffeine later in the day when you're getting close to sleep can be detrimental to your circadian rhythm and your sleep cycle, and disrupt your REM cycles, which to really an unhealthy body. So that is something to be concerned about. The effects of withdrawal, and I can speak to this firsthand, is headaches, irritability, fatigue, difficulty concentrating, and depression. So occasionally I would go through caffeine withdrawal where I'd say, okay, no more caffeine for me. And then all of a sudden in the afternoon, I would need my Coca-Cola. And I would ask Curran to make sure that I don't get a Coca-Cola because I'm an addict. But then I would eventually give in because I have a problem, an addiction, and it's real. But it became a point where in the afternoon, my caffeine withdrawal symptoms were so strong. I would have headaches. I knew that I was going to be really crabby. And I was tired, and I actually like feel nauseous sometimes if I don't have enough caffeine. So I would have to go to the vending machine and get a Coca-Cola just to get through the afternoon. Otherwise, my 7th and 8th hour classes would have hated me. So maybe they did already, I don't know. But those are your physical withdrawal symptoms of caffeine. So it is clearly a drug. I am aware of that, and I am aware that I have a problem. But I bought a latte maker for Christmas, and now I have a double espresso every morning, and it makes me get through the day. So don't worry about me. I'll be fine. Nicotine is a substance that's found in cigarettes. This is all the information. You can kind of pause it and look at all the different things that nicotine does to your system. It actually it's a stimulant because it arouses you. It does reduce circulation to your extremities. So if you see someone that's a chronic smoker, you might notice their fingertips or even their toes kind of discolored or things like that, because it will reduce the circulation to your extremities. But it gets blood pumping, increased alertness, suppresses appetite. I have a good story about fashion models and nicotine, if you ever want to hear that sometime, or remind me on Monday. The main thing about nicotine as a stimulant is it's extremely addictive. It's one of those things that can instantly rewire your body and build up a tolerance, and you need it, you need it, you need it. And I guess I don't have this in the slide, but it does horrible things to the inside of your body, your lungs, of course, and things like that. So whereas, the long-term effects to your body under caffeine are not, terrible, nicotine to the inside of your body is really bad. I'm going to skip that slide. It says people smoke because he's hot. I don't really know about that. Okay. Cocaine. Hell of a drug. Great. We talked about neurotransmitters and how they come out of those neurons. They tickle the next neuron, and then they get sucked back up. The job of cocaine is to block the reuptake, that sucking up process. And so then what happens is those neurotransmitters of dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine are just floating around out there, ping-ponging back and forth for about 45 minutes of sustained activity. And dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine are wonderful feelings. Those are happy feelings. Those are excited feelings. Those are energetic feelings. So under the use of cocaine, a person is feeling amazing energy and basically a high because of those natural neurotransmitters bouncing around in the body. The body is not allowing anything to get sucked back up. So those messages just ping pong out there for about 45 minutes. And then what happens? Once cocaine wears off and those red blockers that are in your picture disintegrate, the cocaine dissolves, for lack of a better term, then you basically crash and you get into a state that was worse before you're taking the drug. And so basically it's the exact opposite. Now your body is without any dopamine, serotonin, or norepinephrine for a while. It's painful, it's depressing, it's lethargic, it's, you feel angry, you feel agitated, you feel tense because you've lost all those natural neurotransmitters. If your body isn't able to suck them back up and use them again, you're depleted for a while. Another thing about cocaine that is important to note is that you develop a tolerance. So I don't know my cocaine measurements anymore. I haven't watched Narcos, but if you take like a teaspoon of cocaine and you feel a certain way, over time, you're going to need to take a tablespoon to get that same feeling because you've built up a tolerance to it, to get to that high feeling. Otherwise, it's just, I need a teaspoon just to be a normal person. Now I need a tablespoon to get that high. Oh, then I need a fourth of a cup to get that same feeling. The quantity of cocaine that you need to get the high gets greater and greater and greater. And then, of course, the more of something that you're putting into your body, the greater the risk for convulsions, heart attack, and of course, death. And what's happening with cocaine and an overdose is basically you have so much in your system, and it's like a gas pedal. So it's like, I'm going, I'm going, I'm going. And just like with the depressants, where you slam on the brakes hard enough, you go to 0 miles per hour and die. Cocaine and a stimulant, you press the gas pedal hard enough, you go 200 miles per hour and just crash into a wall, lose control, flip the car, kind of burn yourself out, start on fire, flame out. So that's what's happening under the influence of cocaine. Methamphetamine is important to know because you're from Iowa. And methamphetamine is a stimulant, whereas cocaine does these things and it produces a high that lasts for 45 minutes. Methamphetamine, what it does is it goes into your system and it triggers a sustained release of dopamine throughout your body. So it's not an uptake blocker. It just gives you a sustained, constant dopamine, 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 dopamine release within your body for about 8 hours. And that constant flow of dopamine in your body creates that euphoric, energetic feeling. So it's like the high from cocaine, only for 8 hours. And if you do the math, 8 hours is more than 45 minutes. Meth tends to be a little easier to access in rural areas like Iowa, which is why it is very popular in Iowa, and why a certain town in our area is known as the meth capital of the United States. What happens with methamphetamine, the crash symptoms are so much more severe. I mean, they're very severe. Irritability, insomnia, seizures, hypertension, violence, and depression. And also, the addiction to meth versus cocaine and some of the other things is so strong and so quick because you're doing so much damage and so much rewiring to your body immediately. On your page, you got the picture of the woman here, and this is in the course of 4 years what happened to her. But that constant 8-hour sustained release of dopamine is a stimulant inside of your body that essentially burns your body inside and outside. So meth does horrible things to all of your organs, your teeth, your nails, your hair, of course, your skin, vision. I mean, any way that you can think, like your body just burns and melts itself. That's what meth is doing to you on the inside and the outside of your body. So besides the psychological, irritability, crash, depression feelings that it does to you, physically what meth does to you compounds, I think, every drug that we're going to talk about today. So it's bad. Ecstasy is a synthetic stimulant. So it's it's not from a plant or anything. And what that does is pushes dopamine and serotonin in your body for a short period of time, causes euphoria. One thing with ecstasy that's different from cocaine is it gives you a feeling of social connectedness and intimacy. So under the influence of ecstasy, you love everybody, want to hug everybody, touch everybody, do things like that. Yeah, in the short run, using ecstasy can result in some regretted behavior because, you're not, there's too many happy drugs in your system so that you tend to do things that you wouldn't normally do, and then you regret that behavior later. Dehydration, overheating, and high blood pressure. So it's a gas pedal. So you're just slamming on the gas. What happens if you, go too fast or turn something up to high and burn it out on the insides? It's what's happening. If you make it past that, the thing that's concerning about ecstasy, if for someone that wants to use it repeatedly, is you end up damaging those serotonin producing neurons in your body that naturally produce serotonin, which we naturally need. If you use ecstasy, your body is going to be like, okay, I don't need to produce any serotonin anymore because we're taking some fake stuff for it. So those serotonin neurotransmitters and neural pathways that you have die and disappear, which means you permanently now have no serotonin in your body, which means you have a permanently depressed mood. So you basically eliminate an entire neurotransmitter neural system from your body because you're using a synthetic substance to mimic that, or to get a high, basically. Ecstasy disrupts your sleep, which we talked about can be dangerous, impairs your memory, your slowed thinking, and it also suppresses your immune system, makes you more likely to get a disease. Okay, next category. So we had stimulants, we had depressants, now we have hallucinogens. Hallucinogens cause different perceptions. They alter your perceptions. Some of these can be illusionary hallucinations, so like you actually see things, or auditory hallucinations. Tactile hallucinations would be like you feel things that aren't really there. You feel spiders crawling on you, even though there are no spiders crawling on you. LSD, otherwise known as acid, popular in the 70s, is a hallucinogen. Causes people to see things that aren't there and other things. And this is where we get to talk about marijuana. So I have a lot more information on pot we can talk about sometime. Write down your questions. The thing about marijuana in the brain, at least, is it binds with your receptors in your brain. And I say bind with because it's sort of like a fatty, waxy substance when it goes and it sits in your brain, the THC, which is why it stays in your system for drug testing a lot longer than alcohol. Well, obviously a lot longer than alcohol because that's in your bloodstream. But I don't know, than some of the other drugs. So if you're an athlete going in for testing and you haven't used marijuana within the last 2 weeks, but you used it a month ago or 2 months ago or 3 months ago, it's possible that it could still show up in a drug test because it's a fatty substance that binds to your brain receptors and it does not dissolve as quickly as, you know, cocaine. That THC, when it binds to your brain receptors, what it's doing is amplifying your sensations, taking away your impulses, creating this euphoric mood. It's sort of like a dome. It creates like a waxy little dome in your brain that totally alters your thoughts and your perceptions and how things are actually happening. The lack of ability to sense satiety is the lack of ability to know whether or not you are hungry. So if you ever hear the term, like if someone is high and they have the munchies, what's actually happening there is the person doesn't know whether or not they're hungry or not, or whether or not they're full. I'm sorry, satiety refers to being full. So they don't know that they're full, so they just keep eating. What happens next, I mean, that waxy buildup in your brain, what it's doing to your perceptions and things isn't good in the short term, because you're impairing your motor coordination, your perceptual ability, and your reaction time. So somebody under the influence of pot probably shouldn't be driving, because they have this amplified kind of strange sense of what's actually happening, the reaction time. Things might be moving faster or slower. It's not a total depressant. It's not a total stimulant. It's like somewhere in between. It creates this weird sort of thought process that actually can cause problems. The more that you build up a tolerance to it. The thing about the THC is, if you're a chronic user, so somebody that uses pot all the time, that those fatty substances that are binding to the receptors in your brain eventually need a place to go. And if you just keep doing it and smoking every day, The waxy substance needs somewhere to go. So what happens is the brain starts to go away, and those fatty substances replace areas where the brain used to be. So the brain actually shrinks over time because the THC sort of pushes it out of the neighborhood. It moves in and the brain moves out. The parts of the brain that move out first are the parts associated with memory and emotion, which is why someone with long-term pot use, someone that we would call a burnout back in the day, that person has very limited memory function, don't remember things well, have difficulty learning things because the parts of their brain reserved for holding on to memories has been replaced by pot, that THC substance. And then the parts of their brain associated with emotion, knowing the proper time to laugh and cry, and how should I be romantic and angry? Those parts that deal with emotion are twisted. And then, of course, because you're smoking marijuana, there can be smoke inhalation damage, kind of like cigarettes, but the pot actually, for what it does to your the inside of your system, is not as severe as nicotine. Nicotine is very much more severe as far as the smoke damage goes. There we go. So those are your different types there. I guess we're only talking about 3 of the types of drugs today. That's right. We'll talk about the 4th one later. So we got depressants, we got stimulants, we got hallucinogens. Those are the 3 that you need to know for this chapter. I guess that's it. So like I said, we will take my glasses off. Review on Monday, but ask me questions about anything that you want today, and study for the test. I recommend that over the weekend you look at your book, look at the backs of chapters 1, 2, and 3. Take some of the practice quiz questions that are in the textbook, because Tuesday is your first test, and it's 50 points, so you can do the math in JMC to see how largely that will affect you. Your consciousness scenario on Google Classroom is also due sometime tomorrow. I don't care when, I'll grade them over the weekend. But that is drugs and consciousness. Mac wants to say bye. No, he does not. Okay, you guys have a great day. Thanks for listening, and let me know if you have any questions.